be a phenomenon that I recently read about in an article in The Guardian's opinion section. The concept of so-called job blockers, or people who continue to work after the expected retirement age, and sort of theoretically prevent younger people from coming into certain careers or institutions, and the question of whether these institutions should implement a mandatory retirement age or allow these people to continue working indefinitely. This is a topic that's particularly seen an uptick in debate and interest in the wake of the American presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, where in particular one of the candidates seemed to be struggling quite a bit, and people were questioning whether it was due to his age or whether, and if it's appropriate for someone in their 80s to have basically the most stressful job in the world. There are a lot of reasons why an older person might choose to stay on in their job beyond a normal retirement age of sort of their mid to late 60s. They might enjoy their job, they might enjoy sort of the social circle that it gives them access to, or feel like they still have useful contributions to make to their profession. But increasingly commonly as well, people might feel like their economic circumstances force them to continue to work due to the high cost of living that we're seeing at the moment, or the fact that they might not have much of a pension saved up to sustain them through their twilight years. However, these kind of difficult economic circumstances also affect young people who are also experiencing this high cost of living, difficulty getting on the housing ladder, buying their first house, and also increasingly getting stuck in very low-paying or temporary jobs, and because there's no real generational turnover that's happening in their fields. So to be clear, there are a lot of reasons why in society in general we expect people to retire. Say you're having an operation, you wouldn't want it to be performed by a surgeon in their 80s. You're driving down the motorway, you wouldn't want to encounter, an 85-year-old lorry driver, and you wouldn't want to force a builder up, 10 floors of scaffolding past the age of mid-50s maybe. But in some spheres, especially academia, less physical and more intellectual professions, people build up a whole wealth of experience over the course of their careers. They feel like they can still make a contribution throughout their 70s. Furthermore, there is no doubt that ageism is alive and well in our society, and institutions need to be very careful not to discriminate against someone who is still perfectly capable of doing their job just because of their age. What's more, when people have spent decades at an institution, such as a university, suddenly kicking them out and removing their access to things like academic email addresses, pigeonholes, facilities such as libraries, can really sting and can leave them feeling cut off from their social and professional circles that they've spent a very long time in. It's also much harder if they want to continue to carry out research to get funding for any kind of research without things such as academic email addresses. Applying for a grant with a Gmail email address is going to be taken a lot less seriously than, for example, sort of .edu or .ac.uk email address that you get from a university. In particular, the opinion article I read that was the subject of this speech spoke about a university professor who had his retirement party and then came into the department the next morning to find that his pigeonhole had already been removed. And this is quite some years ago, so back then no pigeonhole meant you were basically on the scrap heap, it was social death in that academic environment. However, having said all of that, there's still an inconvenient truth that keeping options open for elderly people can delay or even prevent more junior people from getting a foothold on the career ladder. Forms of discrimination and fairness sometimes clash. And in particular in the UK, you can see that argument over a proposal introduced by the Labour Party to bring in a retirement age of 80 for the House of Lords, which is the non-elected chamber of the UK Parliament. It can be seen as a sort of ageist gesture that would deprive the Parliament of some of its most experienced voices. But there's also a lot of importance in hearing new people and new voices rather than making them wait until they are the same age as those people. So to go back to the article that inspired this speech on the situation at the University of Cambridge, this is a question that's currently being debated there, and it's a debate that could have far-reaching implications. The university sector in general makes it hard for those early in their career to properly get on the career ladder, and you can forget any idea you might have of researchers, spending a few years sorting up in the library before slipping effortlessly into a lifelong job. Mostly thanks to funding cuts, most early career academics that the author of the article has met seem to have spent sort of a decade or so on the road, going from one temporary job to another temporary job, often very far apart at different universities, before finally, in their mid to late 30s, struggling into a permanent job. And this is a very precarious system that's obviously not good for young researchers. Imagine being a young researcher trying to get a mortgage with a string of temporary jobs like this. And also for students who want continuity of teaching, not to have their teachers replaced every term by someone else on another temporary contract, and for the universities themselves that don't really thrive on this kind of rotation. This is the main justification behind the University of Cambridge's proposed retirement age of 67. It opens up career opportunities at the bottom of the career ladder in a university where people don't really leave unless they're pushed to do so. A working group at the university, however, recently recommended raising this retirement age to 69 to reflect its changing demographics and specifically an ageing population. But in any case, it's a very controversial idea. Some people claim it's ageist discrimination and it doesn't take into account the contribution that older people can make. They do have a point. However, people must take care not to fall into a trap that is really something that's not limited to people who are about to retire, and that is believing that you are irreplaceable and that wherever you work will just fall to pieces the moment you walk out the door. After all, none of us are going to be around forever. And on the other side of this argument, there's clear evidence that either retaining or bringing in a new retirement age opens up literally hundreds of job opportunities for younger people over a 10-year period. It's a choice, but I think for a lot of people, intergenerational fairness caps ageism in this argument. In the case of Cambridge, there will be a staff vote. But whichever side wins, this is going to expose bigger issues that need to be faced everywhere, especially with our ageing population. What is retirement for? What kinds of contribution can the retired make without job blocking? And how does this relate to new patterns of careers and worse pension provisions that we're seeing? To put it bluntly, what are we supposed to do between retiring and dying? What kind of contributions can we still make? The university promises to think hard about all of these questions, and it's really an opportunity to lead the way in how we value and seriously engage with retired professionals. The value that people can add to professional communities doesn't dissipate on the day that they retire. Institutions and industries need to find creative ways to engage with retirees. And to conclude, in the case of the author of the article, the historian Mary Beard, she chose to voluntarily retire at the age of 67, stating that she couldn't look her precarious colleagues in the eye if she was sticking it out in her post as a job blocker, ending her article with the words, "Intergenerational fairness for me, please." Thank you for your attention.